In this video, I'm going to give you the hidden mechanics on defense that 2K did not tell you about. Discovering these mechanics and understanding how defense works has upped my game significantly online, allowing me to get consistent bumps, quick recoveries, and the ability to stick close to my matchup. In a 2K that's as offensively juiced as 2K26, your ability to play elite defense or even at the baseline competent defense is gonna help separate you from a lot of people online. But first, there's gonna be some uncomfortable truths, and that's badges, defensive ratings, and physicals matter. Not only do they matter more than ever. We'll get to the mechanics later on, but in this game, I value agility and strength a lot. Speed is a given, but investing in those three categories is not going to only help you on defense but on offense as well. So if you're playing My Career, juice that up to as high a level as possible. I recommend defensive badges of silver as a baseline and even max +1 that to as high as you can if you can afford it. But let's make this clear, this is a tutorial for all game modes in 2K26, and first you gotta understand the mechanics. Without holding L2 as long as you are within range of your matchup, that means the shading indicator is typically lit, you will be automatically put in a defensive stance. So it's only when I'm this far away and the shading indicator is not lit that I'm not in an automatic defensive stance. So as you can see from the controller input, without holding L2, I'm already in a wide defensive stance. And this is going to be important because defensive stance is what in previous 2Ks allows you to get those bumps and defensive interactions. So now at this distance, it's only when I hold L2 that I actually enter a defensive stance. Holding L2 and putting you in a defensive stance is important because, as you can see from those two arrows right there, it will orient your body towards your matchup. So SGA's arrow is pointing to Curry, Curry's arrow is pointing to SGA. As long as I got L2 held, it's going to give me a defensive stance that's oriented to Steph Curry regardless of how I move. Think of it as a targeting system that has benefits in creating physical interactions. Now, I said that without even holding L2, as long as you are in range, you will be in a defensive stance. But without holding L2, your body will not orient towards your matchup. As you can see right here, I'm in a wide stance with my arms extended out. But without holding L2, I'm just moving around the floor, turning my back to my matchup. This might be disadvantageous in certain situations, but we're going to discuss why this is important later on. Again, comparing the two stances, on the left, you will see the no L2, on the right with L2. With L2, you are at a wider stance and a much larger target so you can create those physical interactions. The big thing without holding L2 versus holding L2 is that you are faster moving around the court and you have the ability to move in sharper angles to create angles that will cut off your matchup. Now, holding L2 and R2 and moving around with the left stick gives you fast shuffle motion, which again puts you in a defensive stance, but now you're moving around the court at a much faster pace. You can see here that the footsteps that SGA is taking from a lateral or side-to-side movement position is much wider compared to when SGA was in a just an L2 stance. Again, comparing that to just holding L2, you can see here that the foot shuffles are a bit shorter in terms of the distance that they cover. You're also a little slower when holding L2. This has some advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is you can make those micro adjustments, slow your movement down so you can orient your body a little bit better depending on how you're playing your matchup. So the footage on the right is just holding L2 while the footage on the left is holding L2 and R2. And even though the comparisons are not like for like, as you can see, the footsteps and the gather steps on the left are much wider compared to the right, allowing you to travel a little bit more distance at a little bit of a faster pace. Now you can hold up on the right stick, but this will slow you down significantly, whether you're just holding L2 or holding L2 and R2. For that reason, this is one of the cardinal sins of playing defense in 2K26 when game speed is sped up significantly. Do not just hold up on the right stick at any point, except for a few situations which we'll show later on. And again, it's even slower if you are just holding L2. But honestly, the difference between L2 R2 hands up and L2 hands up is very minuscule. While holding the right stick up to do the hands-up defense without holding L2 and R2, you actually can get better contests because you now have two hands up, giving you more ability to contest properly. So now that you can enter a defensive stance automatically without holding L2, you can push up on the stick towards your matchup to initiate physical contact. It's a little bit janky, so if you want more consistent physical contact, you want to hold L2. Here, SGA is trying to keep pace with Steph, moving the left stick alongside Steph's movement while holding L2. As you can see, it allows you to stick closer to your defender by creating physical contact. But similar to the automatic defensive stance, you actually don't have to hold L2 to create a defensive ride animation. You just have to be in the vicinity of your matchup and keep pace by pushing the left stick towards the direction where your matchup is dribbling towards. So here, I'm moving the left stick up and to the right to keep pace with Steph. And you don't even need to hold L2 to initiate those contact animations and activate on-ball menace. And back to that point about badges, as you can see here, even without holding L2, we're able to activate on-ball menace. And that is important because every time that badge activates, your opponent will lose 1 adrenaline bar. So in 2K26, you have 3 bars of adrenaline on offense and defense. Every bar of adrenaline you lose, you will be less effective shooting the ball, finishing at the basket, and on defense, executing steals and blocks. Your matchup will lose an adrenaline bar every time you're able to win a defensive interaction. And the easiest way to win a defensive interaction is to keep your opponent within the red shading indicator. So the shading indicator is those 3 colored bars above your circle icon. As you can see, one of the areas is lit red, directly where SGA is standing in front of Steph Curry. To his left and to his right are green shading indicators, and you as an offensive player will want to attack those shading indicators because these areas will give you full blow-bys if you're able to attack it correctly. However, in 2K26, one way that they juice defense as well is that you don't even necessarily have to outright win that defensive interaction. You just have to keep pace, and if you have a high enough or decent enough badge level on defense, whether on-ball menace or immovable enforcer, your matchup will lose an adrenaline bar. If your matchup loses all 3, this ups your chances to make your matchup miss. Alright, this point is important. Me as Lu Dort right here, I'm moving the left stick alongside Steph Curry's path, leading to an on-ball menace activation and Steph losing an adrenaline bar. But take a look here. I'm not even holding the left stick, and there was an automatic defensive ride animation activated. Also, even without moving the left stick, as long as your matchup attacks your red indicator, you will get automatic cutoffs as well. So again, the first defensive interaction here with Steph as Lu Dort, I was still moving the left stick while holding L2, creating that defensive ride animation. Steph has lightning launch, he was able to slip by Lu Dort as a result. So here I just wanted to reset, but the important part here is that, even without moving the left stick, take a look. Lu Dort just directly in front of Steph. Even if we attack a wide angle to attack the green zone, there is a slight defensive assist that 2K gives very good defenders such as Lu Dort. There was a brief second where he was entering into a defensive ride animation, but it's not a free defensive assist. You're gonna have to hold the left stick to keep pace with Steph. If Steph attacks narrower angles to lead you to the shading indicators, immovable enforcer and on-ball menace will be activated even without holding left stick as a defender. Now, while there is a decent defensive assist for good defenders in the half-court setting, in the full-court setting, that basically goes away, which is one of the reasons why we're going to institute a few rules later on. And that's mostly unless you have a lot of Hall of Fame or Legend badges to keep your defense mostly at the half-court setting. Blitzes aren't effective yet, so the best really course of defense is to keep your defender contained in a half-court setting. Now, that was against Lu Dort, but against Steph Curry, even though there's an automatic defensive assist, he doesn't have high enough perimeter defense nor the badges needed to even offer a lot more resistance against SGA. As an offensive player, if you want to avoid that automatic defensive assist, you're gonna have to launch at the widest angle you can, attacking those green shading indicators and forcing Lu Dort to try to overcommit to cut you off. Now with those basics of movement, let's try to avoid these mistakes. Number 1, my teammate does actually a good job of containing his matchup initially. He cuts off his matchup, gets that bump, but take a look. Not only is he holding up on the right stick to get that hands up, but he's also in the defensive stance, making sure that he's not in a position to move and cut off his matchup. Now here's a mistake I made. I entered into a defensive stance against this Paul George build, and as you can see, the reactions moving left to right if you are in a defensive stance holding L2 at any point makes you slower on defense. It's the same mistake that my point guard teammate makes right here, and as a result, his matchup was able to get to the basket. Compound that one more time, he's got his hands up from like Steph Curry range even without deep bomber, and these are just the mistakes that collapse the defense. If the head of the snake on defense, the point guard or whoever is matching up on the point guard isn't doing a good job, the whole defense collapses. I had to rotate to help right there, but again, stubborn point guard, I'm having to cover for him just because he's making these basic mistakes that you should be avoiding. Alright, let's look at a few key defensive possessions from my end to see how we put everything together. I have a few key rules, especially going up against very competent offensive players. I'm going to be the aggressor on defense. I'm going to push forward to try and attack that shading zone. Not holding L2, just moving up on the left stick without holding L2. Tapping turbo when needed, but I don't want to keep turbo held because it might make me overshoot my target. What is the main benefit of not holding L2? I am as fast and agile as I need to be to really counter a lot of these escape dribble bursts. As you can see from that defensive interaction, I was competing against two factors right here. First of all, the screen. You do not want to be holding L2 when attacking a screen. Second, against a good offensive player who likes to use a lot of these escape dribble bursts, you're going to want to make sure you're moving as fast as possible, and that means no hands-up defense and no holding L2. Not even L2 and R2. That said, if you are going to hold L2, I generally recommend that you only do it while holding R2. As you can see right here, we're a far distance away, but I'm in a defensive stance. That means I'm holding L2. But in order to get the cutoff that I need to hold R2 and attack that side where my matchup is attacking. So once again, this is another example of a defensive possession where we implement a few rules. 1, attack high and be aggressive. This will force a contact interaction, whether it's a defensive ride or an immovable enforcer bump. Forces my matchup to stumble right here, and anytime that they stop with a dribble move, you let go of the left stick completely as well. I'm completely parallel and in a aggressive defensive stance against my defender right here. Again, no holding L2. As you can see, I'm able to change angles and move quickly by releasing L2, meeting my matchup at the spot where he wanted to go, making sure that I'm oriented properly to create a bump. And this is the only time when I start doing the hands-up defense, when he is not in a position to attack me from a aggressive position. So here against a fast and crafty point guard who likes to use these dribble sigs to really try to counter aggressive defenses. Again, I'm trying to attack him high. He goes for that deep box step back. Tries to attack me on my left. Great counter right here with a behind the back. But I'm, once again, trying to cut him off. Meeting him at the middle to force that shading indicator to go red. Even without the help defense right there, I had that defensive possession contained. So again, this defensive possession, I did not hold L2 once. And from our mechanics earlier on, why am I doing this? Because 1, you're able to enter an automatic defensive stance as long as you're near a defender. 2, ride animations and contact animations can be executed even without holding L2. Yes, that includes cutoffs. So now you are able to take advantage of faster movement just by holding the left stick without holding L2, without even holding L2 and R2. It's all about body positioning. The main advantage of holding L2 is that you're creating a bigger hitbox because you're orienting yourself towards your matchup. And because you don't have that target and wider hitbox from a proper defensive stance that's pointed toward your matchup, you're gonna have to make sure that you're able to stay in front of your matchup, and that means high agility, that means high speed, and that means high strength to create those bumps that are important for cutoffs. The one thing that you also have to know from these interactions is that if you are not holding L2, you are susceptible to left stick counters. Now, not too many people use them yet, but the very good offensive players will use left stick interactions to cut away from contact. So it's important to get those bump animations when you can, and the best way to do it, once again, is to keep your shading indicator red centered towards your defensive position and attack high as much as you can. Because if you enter into a ride animation, that's going to put pressure on you to keep the left stick held towards the direction that your opponent is facing. But there are many different counters to attacking that kind of defense. Step back counters, for example, strong handle, lightning launch bursts. So you don't want to be in a position where the shading indicator is red towards the weak side of your matchup's shading indicators. The other thing is, even though you get these bump cutoffs from Immovable Enforcer, once that contact is initiated, this point right here is where you are susceptible to offensive counters, whether the left stick or the right stick. So that's why agility is important, because you're going to want to be able to stop and move and change directions very quickly. And also, this is just another example of why your attributes will matter. If you did not invest in block this year, or if the NBA player you're using doesn't have block, you're gonna be in for a long night. That being said, I'm not gonna say you're not gonna get cooked using a lot of these rules, but I'm hopeful that this gives you an idea of what not to do, because honestly, I'm tired of having to cover for a lot of people's asses online. Too many times people are pressing full court. Too many times people are holding the right stick up. Too many times people are holding L2. And I hope that the mechanics that I explained in this video gives you an idea of how to play good on-ball defense. At least competent on-ball defense. If you just don't do the hands up and hold L2 the entire time, I've already done my job with this video. The skill will really come into how you manage the left stick to make sure that you stay on target against your matchup. So I said in my community day videos that I wasn't sure that defense was at a level that's needed to really match how offensively juiced 2K26 is. I don't think we're still there yet. As you've probably noticed, there are two key components I didn't talk about in terms of on-ball defense. One is the contest system. I'll try to break that down maybe when the patch eventually comes, or maybe just give you an idea on how to properly play contest defenses. The other thing is, I didn't even go into on-ball steals because I think there's such a big gamble. In a game where, and I've showed you this, position matters more than trying to create turnovers, because pluck steals aren't at a point where they're, really good like in 2K25 and early stage 2K24. You're going to want to stay positionally sound. You're going to want to be able to move your feet, and you're going to want to be able to create those contact animations, as you can see right here. So there you have it, a breakdown of the mechanics of how to play defense, how to move on the defensive end of the floor, what mistakes to avoid, and my general rule for attacking of my matchup on defense in 2K26. This is the most aggressive I've been on defense in a number of years, to be honest. Just because giving your matchup enough space with how easy it is to shoot in 26, it's just a losing game. So I hope you learned something new from this video. I hope these help you out. And if you're my teammate, please use these rules, brother. I'm tired of covering your asses.